right, what's up, guys? Welcome to this edition of Emerald Variants. I'm your host, Brandon Troy, host and co-creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. And as you will know, every Sunday we like to dig into the most recent episode of the Loki series that is on Disney Plus. This past weekend we had the season finale for season one. So as always, typically what we like to do is to get into, I guess we can say, the spark notes, if you will, or just the brief recap of what happened in the prior episode, and then get into a brief breakdown of what happened in the most recent episode, and then afterwards getting into some analysis, as well as perhaps some theories and some Easter eggs that had popped up over the course of the episode. Before I hop into all those things, I just want to throw some reminders out there. Make sure that you are liking and subscribing, of course, to the show. If you enjoy these analyses and these breakdowns that we do. Additionally, make sure that whether you're watching the episode live or you're watching it in person, that you are adding yourself to that conversation of using that hashtag that we have, which is Emerald Variant MNSU, or using a Glorious Green MNSU. So as I said, whether you're enjoying it with us live or whatever time you come across our show, and perhaps it's an archive episode and you are watching it later down the line, feel free to join the conversation with us using that hashtag. So with all of those, give me 1 second, all of those things out the way, as always, as I said, we like to get into a brief synopsis. So we'll start first with that first section known as Run the File. So previously on Loki, our 2012 Loki, who was shockingly pruned in episode 4, we learned was transported to another plane of existence known as the Void. It's here where we're welcomed by variants, or say he is welcomed by variants of himself, and soon after, he also is introduced to the destructive force known as Alive. Meanwhile, back at the TVA, Renslayer, in the clutches of Sylvie, reveals the truth about what happens to entities or various timelines when they're pruned, that they aren't destroyed, but rather transferred to the destination that we see our 2012 Loki. Eventually, Sylvie settles to prune herself so that she can find our 2012 Loki in the Void. And it's here back at the Void that we're afforded some details about the various variants that, or I should say, those 4 specific variants that our Loki comes into contact with, in their respective, Nexus events. With our kid Loki, the fact that he killed his Thor, or with our classic Loki, the fact that he, went into, I guess you could say, exile, and even with our boastful Loki, of how he came to be, and some of the things that he exaggerates about things that he has accomplished. So there's definitely some interesting details that they share with us, in that regard. And within that time, we have after we're afforded some details about these variants. At some over the course of that time, our Loki settles that he needs to resolve his issue, or take on this force known as Alive, because he feels, or he has a hint that in destroying Alive, he may learn more about who is behind the TVA. However, before he can really carry out that plan, he's temporarily halted by yet another group of Loki variants. And now at the Void, we cut to Sylvie, who is joined that plane of existence, and she encounters not only Alive, but she also encounters Mobius, who is able to assist her in an encounter that she has with Elias. Mobius, who we previously thought to be dead, but again, if you recall at the top, that in being pruned, they are transported to this different plane. So Eventually, she rendezvous with our 2012 Loki and a few of the variants that survived the skirmish of the large Loki variant fight that we have happened just prior. And upon hearing our 2012 Loki's plan, she's able to convince him to take a different strategy, and that's the strategy of being able to of essentially being able to enchant Alioth, so that way they can in enchanting Alioth, they're able to get past the guard dog, so to speak, so that way they can find out what's behind the curtain, or who is the big orchestrator of the TVA. As they try to execute this plan, our 2012 Loki tries to provide a diversion for Sylvie, and in the process of that, even though Sylvie is attempting to enchant Alioth herself, it becomes far more difficult than she anticipates, and so our 2012 Loki ends up having to step into assist her and provide additional power and support in providing that enchantment. And because it still takes some time for him to be able to learn that ability. It seems like all is lost. However, our classic Loki, the one of those variants that we were introduced to at the top, hops in and assists our duo, so that way they are finally able to enchant Alioth, and in doing so, they end up revealing this stronghold that appears to house whoever is behind the entire TVA. And that is the end of what we have in episode 5. So in episode 6, titled For All Time Always, we pick up right up from that moment, and our duo descends into what is revealed to be the Citadel at the end of time. In the course over the course of this summary, I may switch back and forth between Citadel and Stronghold just for the sake of brevity, but it is identified as the Citadel of Time. And coming upon the doorsteps of this stronghold, there is some hesitation initially on their part, because they don't know what lies on the other side of that door. However, when they finally decide to enter this stronghold, they encounter Miss Minutes, who tries to entice them with what they desire, kind of as a way to I guess you can say, impede or stop their continual progression to finding the truth about who's behind the TVA. And for each of them, it's unique in terms of what she offers. For Sylvie, it's being able to have happy memories in her version of Asgard, because up to that point she hasn't really had the best memories, especially being a variant that was pulled at such a young age. And then even for our 2012 Loki, he is tempted with the possibilities of everything he's ever wanted. That being not only being able to rule over Asgard, but being able to defeat the Avengers, and also to have possession of the Infinity Gauntlet. However, soon enough they decide they eventually turn Miss Minutes down, and in that moment, we're sent back to the TVA as Renslayer investigates further into the identity of the TVA's true orchestrator, and she's visited by Miss Minutes as well, who provides her with information that we as the audience are privy to, but it's yet to be revealed. But even though it's something that we are not made privy to in terms of what the specifics are that she gives her, it appears to be something that is related to our mystery orchestrator. So it's still something of use. So with that being said, once after we have that moment with Renslayer, we're sent back to the stronghold, and our Loki duo find our mystery orchestrator, who is revealed to be none other than He Who Remains, played by actor Jonathan Majors, who invites them back to his office to be able to, chat with them and break down, it seems to be what is, happening and what's going on, because he has obviously that information to share with them of potentially why it appears that he perhaps knew that they were coming, and also maybe to answer some questions that they have themselves about the purpose of the TVA and the sacred timeline and all those things that they have been given as information as variants in this organization. And so, meanwhile, at the TVA, we have one final encounter between Renslayer and Mobius in her office, in which he reveals his partnership with Hunter B-15 to reveal the truth to all the TVA members, that revelation that all of them are variants. And so, back at the stronghold, He Who Remains reveals his origins. He shares his motives for creating the TVA and engineering the sacred timeline, which we eventually learn is a strategy that he's implementing in order to protect Tom from his various variants, who in themselves are quite dangerous and formidable. So he's trying to protect Tom from other versions of himself, so he claims. In revealing his manipulation of Tom to get our duo to in revealing this manipulation of Tom to get our duo to assist him, he also reveals his end game as well, and that is idea that he wants to have someone to take his place. So, the reason why it seems like he is so, come at his doorstep is because he's looking to retire, and he's looking to have a replacement. But it is alluded to, can he really be trusted? This guy who has created the TVA and hasn't really created it under the most truthful of circumstances, and has done it in a very deceptive way. Can he truly be trusted? So back at the TVA, Renslayer and Mobius continue to hatch out, their differences, and the result of which results in, or I should say, it leads to her using her temp pad to go to some other unknown destination, which, again, as I mentioned before, she was provided some information by Miss Minutes, and we aren't privy to what that information is, but we get it's implied that it perhaps has something to do with He Who Remains, and perhaps something in regards to perhaps joining him in his quest to engineer the timeline. Meanwhile, our Loki duo ponders, what to do with He Who Remains. They're provided with an ultimatum. Ultimatum of what to do. They have one or two choices. Either they can, take over for He Who Remains, or they can kill He Who Remains. However, in killing He Who Remains, he warns that in doing so, it will provide a domino effect in which his various other dangerous variants would run amok and be free if he is not there to, police it, or to ensure that those timelines that would produce those variants would be allowed to exist. So it provides an interesting dynamic between both of our Lokis, because they're really trying to decide, is this guy telling the truth? Should we really trust him? And what would be the best course of action? And so, in doing so, in dealing with this ultimatum, they themselves have a conflict and an altercation, trying to decide, what to do. Our 2012 Loki decides that perhaps what he's saying might be the truth, while Sylvie is, after, probably with everything that she's been through, is, a little lacking in the trust department. So she feels that after everything they've done, that the best course of action is to get rid of him. And so by the end of their altercation, she manages to temp pad our 2012 Loki away, so that way she can take out He Who Remains. And in doing so, it leaves us on a huge cliffhanger where we have our 2012 Loki. He is, once he arrives back at the TVA, he comes upon Mobius and the other members of the TVA who have no idea who he is. And we also have that additional revelation of seeing a figure that looks to be a variant of He Who Remains, that is gracing the TVA as a huge statue. And for our comic book folks out there, it you could argue that it is very much Kang the Conqueror, who many of us know will appear in the upcoming Ant-Man film. But who knows? It could be another variant. But chances are, based on the look and the attire that we see on that statue, that it is none other than Kang the Conqueror, who is now in control of the TVA. So we have left on a huge cliffhanger with this first season. And just in general, before I get into some of the analysis with the characters, I guess one thing that has been really interesting with this show is just the idea that, and I've commented on this with the other episodes, is just thinking of the themes that we have in play with each of the MCU shows. So with WandaVision, just that theme of grief, and how we process that grief and that loss. With Falcon and Winter Soldier, the idea of legacy, and being able to carry on a legacy, and how it can go either way when it comes to legacy. Sometimes you can do harm to a legacy, and in other cases you can continue to exemplify that legacy. And with this show, with it dealing with different universes and variants and all those other elements, that idea of free will, and do we truly have free will, and what does it mean to have free will, and those various things, or things preordained or set already, or are we just fated to be a certain way? So in thinking of those themes, there were a couple of things that I found, quite interesting in terms of, the characters themselves. But I want to get into some of the Easter eggs and callbacks. There were quite a few of them over the course of the show, and and thinking of a lot of those callbacks. We had some like right at the top of the episode where we had very distinct quotes from many of the films throughout the various phases that we've had prior to, I guess you could say now it's phase 4, in terms of like the films and the series that we have, on Disney Plus. So we had, and I mean, I'm sure there are far more in there, but at least the ones that I was able to identify, Falcon's quote in Civil War, with the Tic Tac quote, Wasp and Ant-Man, Black Panther, with that chant of Wakanda from Black Panther, Scott Lang being heard from Ant-Man, Black Widow, on the phone in that first Avengers film, Star-Lord in Guardians of the Galaxy with his dance, a friend from work, Thor and Thor Ragnarok, Cap in Endgame, where they have that exchange with the two Caps, Hank Pym, you had Captain Marvel, higher, further, faster. I know I'm just condensing it right now. I'm paraphrasing, that quote, but you guys know what I'm talking about from Captain Marvel, Loki, and Infinity War, where he says, we have a Hulk, Korg in Thor Ragnarok, the Hulk in Avengers. It's very faint, but that puny god line. You have classic Loki in Loki, utilizing that rallying cry that now we can say that Loki has, which is glorious purpose. And then even Vision in WandaVision, talking about love and grief, and even Sylvie in this episode in the Loki series. So there were quite a few things that they touched on within, I guess you could say, the world in the MCU. However, they went far deeper than that and actually got into a lot of historical, moments and quotes from major figures such as Nelson Mandela, Maya Angelou, and many others. So, that portion of it was interesting, but it was interesting in that it was setting the tone for what was to come later in what Kang was explaining in terms of how we have these various moments in time, and how they are, all these markers in time, and how sometimes certain things can happen that can perhaps send off these, or change these moments, and send them off into a different trajectory, which in themselves end up becoming nexus events, and in becoming nexus events thereby end up becoming parallel timelines. So I mean, you have other elements in there as well. I mean, you have the illusion of the Council of Kangs, which was interesting, which in doing so, it seems like by implying that there are other kings out there and that they were all working together. The way it was explained, I know that there are a lot of thoughts out there in terms of, is this really Kang the Conqueror? And I know a lot of people are saying that it's not. I will agree. I don't believe it is either. And a lot of people have been saying that it is Immortus for various reasons. However, one reason that I feel a lot of people haven't been touching on as to why it seems to hint that it is in fact Immortus is just a quote that, or a comment that I should say, He Who Remains states when he's given his origins, and when he's given kind of that breakdown with the presentation, when he references references the person who had discovered the universes, and when he was talking about that first person, he referenced them as a variant of himself. I know it was very fast, but if you rewind it in there, I feel like it's something that if you blink, you would have missed it. It seemed like he wasn't, when he was talking about that initial figure, that person who was from the 31st century version of himself, he identified it as a version of himself and not himself specifically. So if we're picturing, because and thinking of what they have with the Council of Kangs, if we're picturing that he is in fact not the prime Kang, and he's in fact a variant himself, that could point to Immortus, because if we're picturing like what they did with the Council of Kangs, Immortus did have that conflict with the Prime Kang, and perhaps he ended up winning out in that battle between himself and the Prime Kang. So it's quite interesting to, how sometimes Marvel, they throw a lot of these things in here, and how it can and many of the guests that I've had on here have commented on how it seems like it's a throwaway and seems like it's pretty mundane in terms of what characters are saying, but they hold far more weight than we give it credit for. So I mean that was one thing that came to mind. Another cool element was when he was commenting on his various names. And commenting on those various names, he touches on some of the other identities that his other variants have. So he commented on, I've been considered a ruler, which comic book folks know as Tut, the Egyptian ruler, who, for those who recall the comics, he has ties to an X-Men villain known as Apocalypse. So does that mean that he is on the way? So it's exciting in that regard in terms of going back in the past and character. Since he is a time traveling villain, that there could be some allusions to that, and we can get a legit. I mean, even though we did have Apocalypse Manu in the 20th Century Fox X-Men films, we can have a legit accurate uh, or as accurate as close could be to the origins of Apocalypse or In Sabanur. So you have that element. You have Kang, obviously. He said, I've also been called a conqueror, which provides allusions to his title as Kang the Conqueror, who actually will be appearing in Ant-Man. So Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantum Mania. He is set to appear in there. And then also he comments on being a jerk, even outside of that title of He Who Remains. He says, I've also been named as a jerk. And in thinking of each of these titles that he's been provided, it was it it made me wonder who they may be alluding to. Again, going back to that theory of yeah, it seems pretty mundane to have all of these unique and extravagant and superfluous titles, and then have one of it seem like pretty ordinary. Oh yeah, I was also a jerk. I'm picturing that they may be alluding to perhaps Kang, because or that Kang, the Kang company that we were given an Easter egg of in, was it episode 5, when we have that shot in which we're seeing the void, and we're provided like a high shot from the sky, and we're descending in terms of our view as the audience, descending into the chaos of the void, and where our 2012 Loki is dropped off or transported to when he arrives. We do get that illusion where if you again blink if you miss a moment, where we're given that logo of Kang. So perhaps that title is a correlation with the Kang company that we're given in episode 5. But again, if you guys have any thoughts on that, or maybe some other theories or things that you enjoyed, feel free to share it in the comments of what your thoughts are, some theories, some things that you enjoy. But just continuing onwards into our motives, there were quite a few things that were interesting about our characters in this episode, and I guess the ones that I'll probably focus or shed the most light on, that seem to have interesting things, so to speak, going on, would obviously be our Loki duo with Sylvie, and with our 2012 Loki, but also I would say with He Who Remains, so Jonathan Majors, just in that one episode of giving us a sense of his character, and then even with Renslayer. So and thinking of our our Loki duo, it was interesting to see what was happening with Sylvie. Up to this point, Sylvie hasn't really, been playing by, the rules that were expected of her. And I feel like in doing so, that's why she was so successful up to the point that I'll get into in this finale. So it was interesting to see how even despite uh, up in all the prior episodes kind of playing against many of the expectations that we expect of a Loki, that she eventually fell into that same trap that many of our Lokis came across. And it's funny because it was brought up in the prior episode by our classic Loki. And let me see if I can bring up what was said. But um if you recall in episode 5, our classic Loki, when he has that frustration about the all the Loki variants fighting, he states that we can't. He's frustrated, and he says, I mean, is it that we just can't change? Are we all broken? Every version of us is broken forever. There's some. I feel like there's something to that. It seemed like just a moment where he's just venting out his frustrations, but I feel like it plays out very much here, where you're given a sense that despite everything that our two Lokis have been through, and the relationship that they have seemed to develop, that has defied all logic, that despite all of that, there still is a glimmer of mistrust that she has, not only with other variant Lokis of herself, or I should say, just of other variant Lokis, but just of people and other folks in general. So, is that something that she can ever break free of, excuse me, or change? And then likewise with our 2012 Loki, just seeing that progression of where he's come from, and where he is and this is testament to Tom Hiddleston and his performance, but where he starts by the beginning of this series, and where he ends up. So being kind of in that infancy, and I guess you can't really say infancy, but I guess the um relatively within the expanded lifespan, obviously, of Asgardian, that those formative years that he had of kind of being bratty in the Avengers, and allowing himself to be used as a pawn because he was trying to prove himself, and he wanted something to have control of, or to rule, and how that starts to, and this is through relationships that he has over the course of the show. Um, and Mobius has a huge influence in that regard, and of kind of helping him turn over a new leaf, and it's really interesting. Even though he has had that growth, we know that we're getting another season. So is how much of that growth you can arguably say has happened. I guess the jury is still out on that, but even if there is still some room for him to grow, and there's still that mischievous, mercurial nature that he has, it still is clear that he is no longer the Loki that we know from that 2012 iteration. So in thinking of those dual Lokis, and switching gears to what we have with He Who Remains, that element is rather interesting too, because in describing his origins, and again, it was a throwaway line, but I feel it holds a lot of significance, not only in understanding him as a character, but also understanding perhaps some ways to defeat him, is just that idea that there was a moment in the episode in which and let me see if I'll find the quote, where, let's see, where he talks about being narcissistic. So like just that idea that he, is narcissistic and self congratulatory to all his variants are that way. They're narcissistic and self congratulatory regarding their achievements and what they have accomplished. And I found that really interesting is because, you have that element of a character who it appears is so accustomed to winning that a lot of times many things get, sometimes things might get past them because they're overconfident and that they think that they are far, so many steps ahead of their adversary, and not to say that they aren't. A lot of times, they are. And in his case, it appears that he has been in any of the challenges that he has come across. However, in doing so, by having a character this narcissistic, does that also mean that it provides opportunities by any hero that he comes across to kind of use that to their advantage, that he is going to underestimate them and not really take them seriously? Because if you have a control of time, it is you there it provides you with a very interesting perspective, because and if you have control of time, it makes you kind of indifferent to the current events around you, and that's how it appears with He Who Remains. There was very much, and you guys can let me know in the comments, but there was very much a sense of, and I'll actually get into, I guess you can say now it's a DC character, but Dr. Manhattan. Like it reminded me of how once Dr. Manhattan gets um transforms into the being that, the all-powerful being that he is, he kind of becomes rather distant and indifferent to humanity. And I feel you have that quality with He Who Remains, who I actually didn't even get into the comic book name, but I'm sure at some point it will be revealed to be this, which is Nathaniel Richards. I'm not going to get into more specifics of it just for the sake of simplicity, but his name, the name of the character is Nathaniel Richards, and he actually is a descendant of Reed Richards, who, if you know your comic books, you know that he is the leader of the Fantastic Four, which is a movie that is in development and on the way. So it provides connection there. I know I was talking about earlier the X-Men connection, but also having that Fantastic Four connection. But I digress. Just that idea of uh, uh, of Nathaniel, and for this purpose, I'll just leave it to He Who Remains, since that's the name that they use. But just that idea that He Who Remains has that quality about him, I feel will provide some opportunities there whenever he is placed in the villainous role that might be used to the advantage of whatever hero he is coming across. But I still found it interesting because he has such a grip and a handle of time and how it works and how he can manipulate it. He's in a very unique mindset in that if you can, I feel, at least in my opinion, that in controlling time, it provides him with a unique perspective where he's not, he's very much indifferent and kind of has it plays into what we see in his portrayal as kind of like a character who's kind of like blasé and kind of over it and not really fazed by things and kind of indifferent to things. I feel like that idea of having a control of time plays into that idea, because that it naturally, if you were able to go back and do certain things, and a lot of the stresses that we have as people, sometimes you think, oh, can I go back, or can I go forward, or can I do, can I go to this certain point? he's able to do that. So what if you're able to have that ability? It'll provide you a very unique perspective, and I feel like unfortunately in a negative way, it could have a unique effect on how you look at the world and how you view the world. So that part of it was interesting in his portrayal, and in thinking of, like I said, the four characters. I was talking about the duo Lokis, and we have what is it? We have He Who Remains, who I just commented on. We also have Renslayer. Um, with her, and I've commented on this on other episodes, so you guys can check it out there as well. But it was interesting to see how her character had developed, because as I commented in other episodes, is that I didn't anticipate her to be the devout, follower of the TVA. I expected it to be B15, because up to that point she seemed to be, the by the rule, stickler to detail worker, or figure at the TVA. And it seemed like, in terms of the interactions that we saw that Renslayer had with Mobius, who was very, not by the book, and kind of was very creative in his methods. The fact that she allowed him and gave him the rope as her employee to do that, in my mind, gave me the idea that, okay, she's giving him this rope, and she's giving him this leeway to be able to do his job, because she herself has that. Even though she is trying to give the sense that she is very by the book, she allows Mobius to be that way, because on some level she is also that way. However, even despite the truth being provided, the truth of the what is it, the timekeepers not being real, that dogma, which is a term that we were given by He Who Remains in this episode, that dogma of the TVA and their values and what they're about, even once the truth was revealed to her, she still was steadfast in her belief in the TVA and what they were, about, their mission. And it was interesting, that conversation that she had with Mobius, and they were having kind of that battle of wills, and that argument. She, and again, I'm paraphrasing, but this, that idea that she was just saying, yeah, I understand everything that you're presenting to me, and what you're saying about being lied to, but there has to be a reason for this. I can't allow it to not have any meaning for me. So I feel that is a great segue to get into theories. Jumping off of that, the fact that she is so steadfast and you know really doubling down on her beliefs or the dogma of the TVA, it begs the question of where she went. It begs the question of where she went at the end of the episode, because we're not provided any conclusion to that. And obviously, since they're having a season 2, I'm assuming that they're going to get into that, or where she's going, or where she was sent to, or perhaps it'll be revealed as to what was told to her, or what information was shared with her. I do have a theory on that. My theory is that perhaps, just in the same way that we have our duo Lokis, or I should say, I'll switch, our Loki duo, in the same way that we had our Loki duo given the ultimatum, or given the option of taking over the TVA from He Who Remains. Perhaps, because remember, we have in the episode, and I didn't get into the detail when I went into the synopsis, but over the course of that episode, He Who Remains revealed that he knew all the events up to a certain point. So maybe because he didn't know everything up to a certain point, he had Renslayer as his wild card, where he was telling himself, okay, hopefully, our two Lokis decide to go along with my plan, and they decide to take over the TVA. But if it doesn't work, I know that I have another candidate in Renslayer who I can give the coordinates to of where the Citadel is. And because she is steadfast, and because she, it believes in what I've done in in creating the TVA, perhaps she can be my replacement um, in that time. That in the event that I'm killed, or that I am taken out by one of these Lokis. So I feel like he had her in his quiver, so to speak, in terms of as a potential wild card that he could use if the ruse of trying to convince our two Lokis to take over for him didn't work. And my guess is, in that information that was provided to her by Miss Minutes, is essentially coordinates of where he is, so that way she can potentially take over the TVA. I know that there are other theories out there. Maybe she's using that as a way to join with our join with He Who Remains, or with one of his variants. But I'm settling on He Who Remains, and the only reason being is because she before she left out, she had that final comment of saying that she, and again paraphrasing, not the exact quote, but the idea that she is looking to have that free will. So what person would have that free will? Not one. You could arguably say the person who would have that free will would be the person that is in control of the TVA, who is He Who Remains. So in being in that plane of existence where the Citadel is, she would be able to be outside of those timelines and be able to control the TVA. She can learn, a bit from Miss Minutes potentially, or learn from, learn from Miss Minutes potentially. So now that He Who Remains is gone, and maybe something was left for her back at the Citadel, where he can kind of catch her up to speed of everything that's going on there as well, and kind of teach her in a, who knows, in a hologram form. Because I mean, we already have an allusion to that in game, where we have Tony Stark, providing a message to his family in the event that he passes away. So perhaps, He Who Remained did the same thing, and has that, they're waiting for him, or say waiting for Renslayer once she arrives at the Citadel. So who knows? But it also begs the question of what will happen with Sylvie. And that, again, that kind of plays into what I'm thinking with Renslayer. Perhaps the information provided to Renslayer was to get the coordinates there, so maybe they will have a fight themselves, and it, like I said, it results in Renslayer being able to take over the TVA. Another reason why I would say that she is likely a candidate to take over is it seemed like a small thing, but if you guys want to take a look, I'll challenge you guys to take a look at that episode again. In that moment that she has, where they have that, her and Mobius have that brief altercation where he tries to prune her, and she says that, in essence, again, paraphrasing, but she says that, you're not going to be able to do this, or you're not going to be able to do this to me. Is, how does she know that he wouldn't be able to do that? Perhaps one other facet of that, the information that was provided by Miss Minutes, was that He Who Remained perhaps gave her a cheat code, so to speak. He told her everything that was going to happen in that moment, so that way she could anticipate exactly what Mobius would do in that moment, so that way she would be able to incapacitate him and get away. because I don't know, it just seemed to, it seemed like I said, going back to the idea that you have all these mundane moments. I don't think that it was mundane at all that she was able to so quickly dismantle or incapacitate Mobius. I feel like that moment also plays into the fact that not only is Mobius looking to her as a candidate to replace him, but in order to ensure that she was able to get away, he probably gave her all the clues and hints of what would happen up to that point. So that way she would be prepared for it and would be able to get away, because he would have an idea of what was going to happen in that moment, more than likely between, what is it, Mobius and herself. So, we'll see if my theory ends up being right, but it's always interesting to theorize. You know, sometimes these things turn out to be right, sometimes they turn out to be wrong. One other one that comes to mind, and again, like I said, if you guys have any other ones that come to mind for you and something that you think of that would be, that was interesting, whether it was with the characters, like in terms of character moments, in terms of the Easter eggs, in terms of perhaps theories that you have, feel free again to share them, in the comments. Or again, as always, if you are, seeing this event in after the fact and you're seeing it as an archive episode, that you are using, of course, that hashtag, those two hashtags that I gave you. So, what is it? Emerald Variant MNSU and Glorious Green MNSU. But I digress. Going on to some other theories. Another one that I have that it will be interesting to see if something is done with it is we've been provided a hint to it in other MCU shows, particularly on WandaVision, that idea of there being a nexus. And in revealing that concept of a nexus for comic book readers out there, you know where I'm getting at, that you have those, another element of that where you have your nexus being. So in thinking of nexus beings, I feel that there's an illusion there that Wanda may, in fact, may be a nexus being, even though they didn't, dig into it explicitly over the course of that show, because obviously there's so much ground to cover. I'm sure that they'll get into it further, perhaps in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. But is it also indicating that we have other nexus beings out there? So in the same way that we have Wanda being our nexus, being a nexus being, and based on how they described what we have with our have with Kang and all, or Kang, or should say, He Who Remains, and all the variants that we have of him, of Nathaniel Richards. Are they hinting that he himself, that he may actually be a nexus being? Because in that introduction, they talk about how all of the variants all figured out that there was a, they all figured out that there was, a parallel universe, and at that same moment they were able to cross over into each other's universes and meet one another. So, is it, are they hinting at that the idea that he himself is a nexus being? I know, like with Marvel, very much they, and I've said this many times and I will say it again, that they always say that they Ben and Jerry. I always say they Ben and Jerry a lot of elements of what they have from the comics, in that you have, let's see, you have a lot of story bits where they'll borrow story points from one era and they'll borrow story points from another era. If they decide to, strictly stick for the most part with one story, one story element, or one character's origins uh from a particular era, from a particular writer, they'll still wink at the audience with clues or hints of the other iterations that we have of that character. I'll never forget what they did with Captain America. You know, he had the old fashioned costume, and I believe it was a propaganda related play. They showed him in the really old fashioned Captain America costume that was super, that was very comic book accurate, but obviously it doesn't translate to the screen. So, they had to modernize and update it a bit. So, they still provided that moment for fans. However, they still modernized it in the context of how it could work in the film, in an action context. And I mean, we had that. I've discussed that also with what they did with Thor Ragnarok, in which they and how they handled Hela, where they borrowed elements not just from Hela, but they borrowed elements also. It seemed like from Angela, who folks out there, you recall being the long lost sister of Thor and the daughter of Odin. Because in terms of how she comes into play, it feels like they borrowed some elements of how she factors into the story from the comics. And then I was going to say, thinking of a couple of other, I'll say in thinking of how they're Ben and Jerrying a lot of things, it would make sense to have Kang be a Nexus being, because as someone who has had such a major influence on different timelines, different universes, however way you want to shape it, he clearly is pivotal in how each of those timelines play out in a major way. So a very easy way to kind of explain that away, I feel, would be to make him into a Nexus being in the same way that we have for Wanda. So we'll see if something comes of that. But if you do hear that, you heard it. You heard it here. Don't forget that you heard it here. That there was a theory out there that he himself, he who remains, could be a Nexus being. There are other elements that I wanted to get into in terms of theories. Give me one sec. Um, I know I already talked about some of the Easter eggs that we have with X-Men, like I said, with Apocalypse and what can become of that. We have the Eternals film coming, so will there be an opportunity in an Eternals film for us to see a variant of Kang that is, went back in time and is ruling people in ancient times, and will we get a Easter egg or illusion or a name drop of that? That would be interesting. I already talked about, as I said, Kang as a Nexus being. We have him in other films, popping up in other films. So with us having Multiverse of Madness, will we get the name the term drop of Nexus beings? I'm assuming we will. Now that we kind of have already established the idea of chaos magic, and we've already gotten over the hump of explaining how Scarlet Witch has many of her abilities. So now we can dig even deeper into some other crazier concepts. And that's one thing that I will give credit to Marvel for, is that now that we have that foundation set with many of these characters, it's interesting to know. It's very interesting to know, uh, now that many people know who these characters are, and we have a basis of what they can do, that we can get into some crazier concepts and some crazier ideas. I mean, now we're getting into alternate universes, the multiverse. We're getting into magic and all these other, crazy things. But let me see. I do have a comment here. So yes, thanks for the comment, Josh. So let me read the comment. It says, I really think that the Loki series was his Thor moment. Loki loses everything and gains humility. After that, he's able to remake it. Yeah, I mean, I definitely, agree that is a moment, from that you could argue would be a moment that he has. However, I will say that in thinking of the different possibilities with the different possibilities that we have with Loki, there are a lot of like major moments that I'm thinking of in the Thor film where they could use that as a nexus event of him becoming a variant. So like just going down the line, you have the moment where they're fighting in what is it in Jotunheim and at the top of the film when they're fighting the ice giants. And I feel like there was an opportunity either there or even back in the throne room where he is helping the frost giants into the throne room, where they could have revealed to him that he was himself a frost giant. So in doing so, how would that have played out if he had known that he or they revealed to him that he was a frost giant rather than his father revealing it to him, and how would that have shaped who he would have become? In that moment, would he have sided with the frost giants then and there because they had revealed to they themselves revealed that to him rather than his father revealing that to him. Was there opportunity for the Infinity Stones or the Infinity Gauntlet, that was in the throne room. In Ragnarok, um, you have that idea, or you're provided that illusion in Ragnarok by Hela that the Infinity Gauntlet was fake. Maybe in one timeline, maybe it wasn't fake. Maybe he actually did have the gauntlet, and there was an opportunity for it to be snatched away by Loki or by someone else in Asgard, or someone came to Asgard. Maybe one of the elves from Dark World. I mean, there's so many possibilities of us having these various Nexus events and possibilities of things to come. And I have another comment here. So, when do you think season 2 will be coming out? I know right now, so far as I know, and you guys can let me know, I haven't heard any details regarding when season 2 would come out. I mean, ideally, I would think that they would do it within the same block of time that they have done with this season 1 series. So if we're picturing many of the other films that are on the way, and this is potentially we could see it in in the summer of next year. But I mean, who's to say how they're going to do their shows, because this is the one show that is getting a season 2, so they might spend an extra year on it now, especially seeing that they have such a backlog of projects that are being released. So there's not really a need for a bunch of they're not hurting for content, but at the same time, we also have to remember that there are other Disney Plus shows that are on the way as well. So, you still have to have that breathing room and have those other shows that still have yet to have their first season be able to, have their moment on Disney Plus. And it seems like they are spacing out these shows in such a way where each of them are provided their moment to shine. It doesn't seem like they are trying to put multiple things out all at once, because they, in doing so, you run the risk of each project, I feel, hemorrhaging each other. So, drawing attention from each other, be it a Disney Plus series or be it a movie. which runs into my theory, by the way. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it just made me think about it. Is more than likely the reason why we still haven't gotten that Spider-Man trailer. They were probably waiting, and this is a hat tip to a good friend of mine, Dan Franco. You know who you are. A good friend, and he had brought it up in a show that he was doing, and talking about that idea that they're probably waiting based on what they revealed this week. And you know, I have to agree with them that idea that where they where they left this show, and what has transpired in the show, they're probably trying to have, you know, some breathing room between what they have set in this series and what they're trying to figure out in the promotional material, what they can reveal, because they have to be very careful on what it is they want to share, I feel, in that trailer. Because I mean, we kind of take it for granted. A lot of people watch the Disney Plus shows. However, even though we have a lot of people that watch the Disney Plus shows, believe it or not, there are folks out there who do not watch, you know, streaming shows. So, you know, they are very casual fans, and, you know, Marvel has to be very careful in terms of being able to ensure that, you know, that audiences can still follow along, even though, you know, hardcore fans like us, you know, we consume every bit of content that is made available. So, you know, we're able to enrich our experience by being able to not only watch the movies but also watch the shows. But I will say this one thing that kind of caught me off guard. I'll be honest with you with this episode. Is I would definitely say that it was very ambitious by Marvel to do what they did in revealing. I guess you can say Kang the Conqueror, but I'll just stick to, because technically, as I feel, as many other folks are saying, he's not Kang the Conqueror. I would say he's an amalgam of He Who Remains and Immortus. But even despite that, I feel like it was very ambitious and very brave of them, I feel, to have him be the big bad. Because I'll be honest with you, I was all the way up to, you know, since episode 1, he was in fact the person that I felt was, you know, behind the curtain. But in thinking of other shows that we've had in the past, you know, we had the Inhumans, and we've had, you know, Agents of Shield, and we've had the Netflix shows, and, you know, yeah, they introduced some interesting elements, but in terms of that relationship, that cohesion between TV and film, or streaming and film, hasn't been there. So I was like, okay, even though all signs are pointing to, you know, Kang or a variant of Kang, maybe, you know, they might cop out, and they may make it a variant of Loki, so that way it's still a self-contained story. Because let's be honest, like, up to this point, the other two shows, while they introduce a lot of, you know, interesting things, even though they introduce a lot of interesting things, one could argue that even without those shows, should they do like an installment that brings those characters back, they could just do a throwaway line to you know, explain, you know, what has happened or what they've been up to, you know, off screen. Even though we are, you know, us, the hardcore fans, know what they've been up to, because we were enriched by, you know, looking at this additional content that gives further backstory as to what happened, you know, in that time up to that film. But in the case of Kang, of Nathaniel, of He Who Remains, whatever name you want to go with, you know, that provides a more interesting challenge to introduce a villain that's going to have that much of an impact on the MCU at large, or potentially have that huge of an impact on the MCU at large, and to not have him start in Ant-Man, but to have him start off, even if it is a variant of himself, to have it start off in Loki, I feel is super ambitious, because, there's no guarantee that people are going to. I mean, people, like I said, people watch the Loki series, but there still was a chance that that folks would just watch. You would have those casual moviegoers that would just go see the movies and not really watch the TV shows. So now by having Kang in this episode, now all bets are off. Now we're setting the precedent that in any other Marvel series there is the potential for something major to happen, and if you don't want to be on the outskirts of that or not be aware of that, then these shows are now going to have to be must see, TV, must see streaming, whatever you want to call it. Like it's going to be must see viewing, because if you don't watch episode now that it has been set now in Loki and what they have done with this first season of Loki, all bets are off now. Now you can have a major villain get their introduction in a Disney Plus series and no one will bat an eye at it, versus you just expecting that they would find that introduction in a in a film. So yeah, for sure. So let me see. I have another comment. I really thought the villain would be a King Loki variant, because I didn't think they would introduce Kang. Yeah. So yeah, exactly to my point. So I absolutely agree with you. I'll admit that I caved towards the end, and I caved that it would end up being a Loki variant, like maybe whoever whoever the original timekeepers were. Maybe they gave it to a variant of Loki who also found the Citadel, and because Loki, desired to be in control, and because he had that desire of being a king, that yes, he would have been in essence King Loki at the Citadel. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you. But yeah, so I mean, those are my general thoughts. With this episode, with the season finale of Loki. I'll be back next season going into many of the breakdowns, but let me know and you guys can let me know in the comments. I may potentially do some one-offs here and there, as the gets new season is still being developed, because as I said, this show, in terms of everything that has happened in this show, is going to have major ramifications, across the board with, many films. I'm looking to, the impact that's going to be felt in Spider-Man, No Way Home, in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and in many others. And then even down the line, fingers crossed, that it ends up becoming a Secret Wars, and how that could end up being. You could have a multiversal war, in that regard. Because, and I didn't even get into this, so I'll share this additional theory before I head off. But just that idea, if we have this war that now has you know been set to begin, now that we have the possibility of these timelines that can create all these variants of what is it, of Nathaniel Richards. What does that mean, that the way that it will be adapted for film? And again, you're hearing here first, but I have no proof of this, I'm just theorizing. Does that mean that you'll have each of the variant Kangs, each of the variant Nathaniel Richards characters act as the leaders of their respective universes, and they will act as the figureheads of their respective universes, recruiting the superheroes of their respective universes to all fight one another for supremacy of their respective timelines or their respective universes? Think about it. Like that would be interesting because, you know, again, you would in terms of how it could be adapted, and you could do it in the same way that you have with Civil War, where, you know, there is a logical reason as to why all of these characters from all of these universes are fighting one another, but um, even though they're fighting one another, they're eventually going to come to the realization that, you know, yeah, it makes sense that we're fighting for our timeline, but do we have to do that? The real problem here is Kang. So we have to get rid of the Kangs of our respective, you know, universes in order for this problem to go away. So perhaps that is what is the end game in end game. See what I did there? End game in the major, you know, the next major big crossover event, which I believe will more than likely be Secret Wars. And, you know, it's already been, you know, quoted. You guys can look it up that the Russo brothers, if they did come back, that was one of the films that they said that they would be most into doing was that film or iteration, an adaptation of that story. So who better to, you know, come back and do that, and you know, they in doing that story, you know, all bets would be off anyway as well, because now you can bring, you know, if the story, the rumored story with Spider-Man is to be believed, you know, all bets are off with superhero characters from any universe. I mean, man, they could bring in the Ang Lee Hulk. They could bring in Wolverine. They could bring in Mystique. They could bring in any of these characters. They could bring characters from the 20th Century Fox X-Men, from the 20th Century Fox Fantastic Four. Like, they could bring the characters from many other universes that they have done, you know, in terms of their superheroes. They could do the, if they wanted to, not to say that they will, but the possibility is there. They could do the Punisher from, you know, that solo Punisher film from with Thomas Jane. They could pull any of. They could do the Netflix universe. Like, sky's the limit, truly. So it's really exciting to to see, you know, what Marvel is doing, and what the possibilities are, you know, for sure. Because, you know, thinking of all these different ways that Kang, just himself, you know, factors into so many different superhero teams and so many different characters, be they heroes or villains. It's super exciting to see, you know, what they do with that, and how they really take advantage of the versatility of that character, and what other things that they can branch out of it, for sure. But with that being said, I'm gonna get off here. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm your host, Brandon Choi, host and co-creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. Of course, you can find me on Twitter at you can find me on Twitter at Brandon Choi ENT, which you see down below. However, you can also find me at Brandon Choi _ ENT on Instagram. You can also find us on, let me bring it up here, on Twitter at Move and Shake UNLTD. So let me bring that up there. So yes, at Move and Shake UNLTD on Twitter, and on Mover Shakers Unlimited on Instagram. So with that being said, guys, thanks so much for watching. Be safe out there, and I will see you soon. Peace.